Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm now going to call today's Land Use and Development Committee meeting to order. Thank you for being here today. And I do wish to begin by acknowledging that the meeting and the district of Sooke is located on the traditional lands of both the Sooke and Shannon nations. We'll turn our attention to number 3, which is approval of today's agenda. So the motion would be that the agenda of the February 3rd, 2025 Land Use and Development Committee be adopted as presented. Moved by committee member Ritz, seconded by Councillor Bateman. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Just I'm going to ask our corporate officer, do we take movers and seconders in committee or just have one mover?
Yes, Chair. Strangely, the committee of the whole is listed in the procedure bylaw as being movers only, no seconders, but all other committees are movers and seconders.
Excellent. Thank you for that clarity. So looking to adoption of meeting minutes, that the minutes of October 7, 2025 Land Use and Development Committee be adopted as presented, please. Moved by Councillor Bateman and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Thank you. All those in favor? And that's adopted. Thank you. Public question and comment period. Mr. Broman, is there any comments you wish to make regarding today's agenda? Okay. For the viewing public, we have one member of the public in chambers presently whom I happen to know the name of. So thank you for being here. Yes, sir.
Chair.
In the microphone. I can't hear you.
Chair, I have to excuse myself from the meeting at about 1:25. I'll go down and log into the CRD water meeting downstairs. So I don't know if that, I think we got quorum.
Quorum is 4.
Yes, Chair. The quorum of a standing committee with 7 members would require 4 people in the room, of whom at least 2 would need to be members of council. So even with Councillor Pearson's departure, we would meet both of those criteria.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Pearson. You'll be all clear then.
Okay, and I will be downstairs if
we're stuck?
if you're stuck. Well, if someone excused themselves, or heaven knows why. If someone excused themselves, I could come back up for a vote.
Sure.
And it may be a short meeting today at the Wanafika Water meeting, but it may be short here. You never know.
You never know. Well, feel free to exit as you need to. We're all cool. And please rejoin when you can.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us straight into item 6. 6.1 is reappointment of LUDC committee members. So I'll just ask staff, is there anything further to report on this?
So through the chair, this report is simply to flag that the current year term for the community members of the Land Use Development Committee is coming to an end in early March. What I'm asking today is to simply confirm with the current community committee members whether they are interested in continuing to serve should the committee be extended for another term. And so there's really no decision required of the committee. It's really, I'm just looking for a verbal from both of the committee members present here today. If they are interested, this will come to the February 23rd regular council meeting, at which time the mayor at the council meeting, as it is a standing committee, as her standing committee, can make the decision at that meeting if we are going to extend the term. And so bringing that report forward, I just wanted to know from the members if you are still interested in remaining for the term.
Okay, thank you to our deputy. Councillor Pearson, can you turn your mic off? Thank you. So I'll now ask our public members of the committee if you wish to remain on the committee to the end of the term, or in this case would be till the call of the till the election would be when it would end, October of this year.
Definitely, Rob Barry, in for another year. Feels like we've only got a few meetings under our belt with lots of cancellations and almost a early or a false start. So yeah, definitely in for another year.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Ms. Ritz?
Yeah, Helen Ritz, and I would be a yes as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So in this case, that's just for information, confirming that. We'll move on to 6.2, please. And this is Bill 25, small scale multi-unit housing zoning bylaw number 600 review and direction. So over to our staff.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this item is an information report related to Bill 25 and small-scale multi-unit housing. Oh, sorry. This report is intended to brief the committee on Bill 25 adopted by the province in November 2025 and clarifies how small-scale multi-unit housing requirements are to be implemented by local governments. Staff have completed a preliminary review of Sooke's zoning bylaw to understand the implications of Bill 25 and are seeking the recommendation of the committee to council to direct staff to amend the zoning bylaw to comply with the new legislation. Bill 25, the Housing and Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act, is a provincial legislation that amends the Local Government Act and provides clarification on how small-scale multi-unit housing, or SMU, is to be regulated at the local level. The intent of this new legislation is to ensure a more consistent application of SMU requirements across municipalities and to reduce zoning approaches that may technically comply with the legislation but indirectly limit the number of dwelling units required by the province. Under provincial legislation, SMU requirements apply primarily to what are referred to as restricted zones, meaning zones that historically only permitted single detached or duplex dwellings, or currently do. In Sooke's context, this generally translates to a requirement to clearly permit up to 4 dwelling units per parcel, depending on servicing and location. Through Bill 25, the province is looking for zoning bylaws to clearly permit the minimum number of SMU dwellings required under the legislation unambiguously, rather than relying on layered or interpretive approaches to achieve those units. The district is currently in a relatively strong position compared to other municipalities. The zoning bylaw already permits small-scale multi-unit residential dwelling, defined as a residential building containing 2 to 4 units in previously restricted zones. This means that at a high level, Sooke has already moved in the direction intended by provincial SMU legislation with its zoning bylaw update in February last year to address Bill 44. Sooke did not intentionally make achieving the 4 units through indirect means. However, staff have noted that the RU4 and RU5 rural residential zones, which technically have the ability to meet the restricted zone criteria, were not amended to permit 3 or 4 unit residential buildings, specifically when location, parcel size, and servicing criteria are met. Instead, achieving 4 units on parcels in the RU4, RU5 zones that otherwise meet the criteria can only achieve 4 units with the construction of attached or detached suites. This is considered an indirect way of achieving the required 4 units, which is what Bill 25 is aiming to address.
Could you just clarify that for me in English?
Could we wait to the end for questions? Is that possible? Yeah, therefore, to address this, staff are simply recommending that small-scale multi-unit residential dwelling is included as a permitted use in these zones, subject to meeting the SMU criteria. So this would essentially mirror what's reflected in the R1, R2, and R3 zones for SMU purposes. Where the criteria is not met, then single detached dwelling, duplex, and suites may still be permitted. There would be no change to land use permissions in that case. This approach would ensure that the minimum number of dwelling units required under SMU legislation are clearly permitted per parcel without relying on accessory units, and would bring the bylaw into clear alignment with provincial intent. So under provincial legislation, amendments are required to address Bill 25 by June 30th of this year. And subject to direction of council, staff would prepare amendments and return to the committee prior to being advanced to council for consideration. And then I have the recommended motion here before the committee to receive this report for information and recommend that council direct staff to prepare and return with proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw to address Bill 25. That concludes my presentation, and staff are available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. As we are in committee, I'll go straight to questions before putting the motion forward. So Mr. Barry, this is your opportunity.
Just clarify, it sounded like any properties that were previously zoned for 3 or 4 units couldn't multiply those by 3 or 4. They just still have to do 3 or 4 units. Is that what you're talking about on that one?
Through the chair, that's correct. So we're not increasing the number of units that are permitted in the R1, R2, R3 zones, but there are some circumstances where we just had duplex single-family dwelling and duplex permitted in the RU4 and RU5 zones, which could feasibly achieve the SMOO criteria. And in those cases, Bill 25 now asks us to permit triplexes and fourplexes on those zones if they do meet the criteria, just like the R1, R2, R3.
Does that help? That's good. Okay. Counselor Pearson?
So hypothetically, RU4 was downzoned, I think, in 2011 or 12 or something like that. Sewer specified area. If we, if someone applied under RU4, because our current lot size is a minimum on RU4, right? That's going to continue on through.
So through the chair, the minimum lot size is 1 hectare outside the sewer specified area and then 1,000 square meters inside.
Okay, so fast forward, someone makes an application, RU4 to be rezoned, they'll automatically pick up the SMOO legislation for increased density?
Through the chair, so right now, RU4 inside the sewer specified area? Or
Some
on-
parts, right, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So some lots are, so they would, if they meet the criteria, so if they're under 4,050 square meters, are connected to water and sewer, then they would be required to permit up to 4 units under the provincial legislation. So we are making that tweak to the permitted uses to make sure that the building typology is unambiguous to what that 4 units is, rather than a duplex and secondary suites or small suites to make up the 4. We need to permit a fourplex as well.
And I'm following the bouncing ball now. So if in fact that someone decided or made application to subdivide, they could subdivide within RU4 without rezoning as long as they're hooked up to sewer and water.
Through the chair, part of the subdivision application process, staff would confirm that they meet the minimum parcel area and any servicing requirements.
Yeah, I'm just gonna assume that we've got 4,000 square hectares and they want to divide it into, now the sewer comes past, they've, you know, it included, council has included them in the sewer specified area. So now they want 4 1,000 meter lots out of their parent property. The zoning won't change, right? So it's not gonna require a zoning amendment. But they now will be able to increase that density from 1 house now to 16. Is that kind of where I would say, or 16
Yeah.
rather?
So through the chair.
In my scenario.
Yeah, through the chair. And in your scenario, yes, they wouldn't necessarily have to rezone. And if they do meet all the criteria, regardless of the number of lots, they would obviously have to meet the RU4 zone if
Yeah.
they're not proposing smaller lots than 1,000 square meters. But if they met the criteria, then yes, each one could develop a fourplex or a triplex in a suite or a duplex and 2 suites. Anyway, to make up that 4 unit. Yeah.
Okay. And my last and final question, and it's a hypothetical question, is that a bit of a miss on our current zoning? Should those 1,000 current 1,000 meter lots minimum on the sewer specified area, should they be zoned something different than RU4?
And through the chair, it's difficult to say. I believe they're intended to maintain a rural character, right?
Right.
And so most of these rural lots do have large minimum parcel sizes. But yeah, we do have some lots, I think the north part of Whiffen-Spit, for example, that are rezoned RU4 that must meet the SMOO criteria. So that's what we're trying to address here. But yeah, typically as per the purpose statement, these are lots that are intended to be rural in nature and intended for residential purposes, although agriculture is still a permitted use here.
Yeah, and it's just as we push the sewer area down, Whiffen-Spit is the perfect example, right? So we'll have that zoning issue is going to come back. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, so as we push the sewer specified area down Whiffen-Spit, that's to be determined at future dates, just to be clear. So thank you for the report. It seems very straightforward. This is the province again requiring local governments to act. You've identified some gaps within these in the SMOO zone, which is, I believe, about 2,000 lots, 2,200 lots in Sooke with sewer and water hookups. And we'll be receiving back your amendments in due course. And so just on the bigger picture of that zoning bylaw, you told me about you told us about the district's plan for a new zoning bylaw. Could you just reiterate that? I think it's a 3-part phase over this next 2 years.
Yeah, thank you for the question through the chair. So the kind of the staggered sequencing of zoning bylaw updates is really about OCP consistency. So a bit of a separate issue. In this case, we're just looking at making some changes pushed by the legislation on the 4 units in the SMOO legislation, but we would be also looking to bring forward some OCP compliance amendments to the zoning bylaw as well at a later time, probably in the next few months. Yeah, this year.
All right. Yeah, I was just seeking for the committee's information, that larger plan, which I believe you'll be doing these OCP specific amendments in the near term, but then the larger look at a new zoning bylaw will be happening in phases this year and next.
Yeah, so just for clarity through the chair, so we'd be looking at OCP consistency updates to the zoning bylaw this year, and then we are considering a full-scale update to the zoning bylaw in 2027, subject to budget.
Okay, thank you. Just, this is not a minimum requirement, is it? Like, so if someone had let's say a vacant 1,200 square meter lot that they wish to build on, do they have to put in 3 or 4 units, or could they just build a single family house?
Through the chair, it's voluntary, completely voluntary. So
Okay.
it doesn't require someone to build a fourplex, but it permits up to 4 units.
They
if
could
the
build a
criteria is met.
fourplex, or they could just build one single family house and have some property to enjoy.
Yeah, just like in all the SMOO zones, we have single family dwelling is still a permitted use, duplex, triplex, fourplex. So it's really up to the property owner and the zoning and meeting the criteria.
Okay, and then in order for this to apply, I believe you mentioned that these properties must be serviced by both water and are within the sewer service area in order to go ahead. Okay. It may be helpful for the committee when this returns, and should council propose us to move in this direction, if you could provide maybe a map just so we can see where those particular properties are located. And obviously it's something that's being mandated by the province. However, should we move in that direction, then I think the mapping would help, because then you would also see where are the closest parks, where's the transit lines, where's the schools, what other amenities exist in those particular areas, just to highlight that, because this may or may not be, it's satisfying a provincial checkbox. I'm not certain that it meets our town's objectives of where people live close to amenities and transit and everything else. This just feels like urban sprawl to me, but it's again dictated by the province. Over to Ms. Ritz.
Through the chair. SMOO is somehow related to transit, the proximity to transit, is it not? Is there like a 400 you have to be?
Through the chair, so the relationship to transit would be around rapid transit stations. So in those cases, Sooke isn't affected by that regulation, but if we did have it based on frequency, basically of transit every 15 minutes, I think over Monday to Friday, we would be required to increase the maximum permitted number of units to 6 in some of those areas within a certain proximity. I believe it is 400 meters to that transit stop.
Yeah, that was the other part of the legislation, but in that case, it doesn't apply out here. It would impact more Colwood, Langford, UVic, Victoria, Saanich, or Surrey, Burnaby, where there is dedicated skyline. Like, we have a park and ride in our rural part of our community, but we do not have a bus of every 15 minutes.
So for us, it's water and sewer.
Yes, because
Yeah.
otherwise, how would you
Okay.
putting some folks are challenged even to have septic for a secondary suite. So it is the service, and a well would not likely service 4 units all flushing away. Go ahead, Councillor Pearson. Sure, you read it in the microphone.
That the Land Use and Development Committee received the report titled Bill 25 Small Scale Multi-Unit Housing Zoning Bylaw Number 600 Review and Direction for Information, and recommend that council direct staff to prepare and return with proposed amendments to zoning bylaw number 600 to address Bill 25, the Housing and Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act 2025 Small Scale Multi-Unit Housing, or SHMU.
That's moved by Counselor Pearson and seconded by Counselor Bateman. Would you like to motivate Counselor Pearson?
No, I think we've hit all the key points on it. Sewer specified area has to be there, and I think the rest falls into place. I don't like some parts of it, but it's legislation, and let's get in front of it best we can.
Counselor Bateman?
Yeah, I think I motivated in my earlier comments. I had a remaining question, and that was SHMU uptake in terms of number of applications you're seeing run through the system with yeah, tell me more. I know early on there was not much uptake at all.
Yeah, so the last time I checked, I think there was 3 people, 3 separate lots that had taken up the opportunity to do extra units. So there hasn't been a big uptake on this. Thank you.
Hasn't been, or you say it has been?
Hasn't been.
Hasn't been.
No.
No, I would. No, I mean, that's fine. So in terms of process, this will hit the consent agenda, but then the work on the next iteration will then return to the committee and then likely a referral to pass zoning amendments. Is that correct? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Be interesting just to log how many meetings, staff involvement and time have gone into this work. And just in my cheeky way, I just want to invoice the province for it. Because again, it's them interfering in the work of other things that we need to do. So I'll leave it at that. To our committee member, Barry.
Just a comment, I belong to the Victoria Home Builders Association, and the builders, developers there work in 12 municipalities. There's been a lot of chatter about this. And that's exactly what's been coming back to the different municipalities, is that it's voluntary. And so the province is pushing, but the developers and the builders are going, well, it doesn't really make sense in a lot of situations. There's a lot of arguments in neighborhoods about it and that sort of stuff. So even though you're not going to official community debate about it, there's still a lot of debate. So the uptake is not as big in most areas. A couple municipalities are uptaking fairly quickly just because of the population. But other than that, I don't know how the province is actually going to make their numbers.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'll call the question on the committee. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Our next one is the 6.3 vacation accommodation use clarification, zoning bylaw alignment with provincial legislation.
Yeah, thank you. So this item is also an information report related to short-term rental regulation, referred to in our zoning bylaw as vacation accommodation. This presentation accompanies the staff report before the committee today and is provided for information only. The intent is to outline a zoning clarity issue related to short-term rental use and to seek the committee's recommendation to council to direct staff to proceed with further work. No specific bylaw amendments or policy changes are being proposed at this time. To avoid confusion, it's helpful to clarify the terminology used in this report. Provincially, the activity is referred to as short-term rental accommodation. In the district zoning bylaw, the same activity is defined as vacation accommodation. The report and presentation use both terms intentionally, reflecting the interaction between provincial legislation and local land use regulation. In 2023, the province introduced a comprehensive short-term rental framework through Bill 35, specifically the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act and associated regulation. The provincial approach is centered on a principal residence model, generally limiting short-term rentals to a host's principal residence and either one associated secondary suite or detached suite on the same property. Importantly, the legislation explicitly preserves local government authority over land use regulation and business licensing, making it possible for affected municipalities to be more restrictive if they choose. Vacation accommodation is defined in the zoning bylaw as a distinct land use, meaning that throughout the residential zones, you'll see vacation accommodation units specifically listed as a permitted accessory use, similar to the way that bed and breakfast, home-based business, and secondary or small suite are presented. Here's an example of vacation accommodation unit listed in the R1 zone as a distinct accessory use alongside bed and breakfast, home-based business, and others. This set of permitted accessory uses is consistent generally across small-scale multi-unit residential and rural residential zones. However, unlike the other uses in this list, vacation accommodation does not have a dedicated set of standalone regulations governing how it operates within the zoning bylaw. This has led some clarity issues for staff and the public in applying the zoning bylaw regulations consistently. This slide provides an example of the bed and breakfast on the left and home-based business regulations on the right, which exist in the general regulations section of the zoning bylaw. These are clearly distinct accessory uses, land uses with their own suite of regulations. Something similar for vacation accommodation is what's being recommended by staff. Important to the discussion is section 4.3A of the home-based business regulation highlighted in red on the slide, which has historically been used to require the operator of a vacation accommodation unit to reside on the lot, essentially requiring staff to link vacation accommodation use with home-based business to regulate short-term rentals. This is the link that has been made to confirm consistency with the provincial short-term regulation or short-term rental legislation's principal residence requirement. And the definition of vacation accommodation provided here on the screen, on the left, identifies the types of residential units where the use may occur, but it does not establish detailed operation rules, nor would it be expected to as a definition. The only other location where vacation accommodation is noted in the zoning bylaw, other than lists of permitted accessory uses, is in section 3.27 and 3.28. Located on the screen here, where suites are regulated, but again, it only confirms the dwelling types where the use may occur. Another example where clarity is needed is where vacation accommodation is proposed within a single family dwelling, which is permitted by its definition only. For example, a room for rent on a short-term basis. As well, there's no explicit zoning direction regarding the number of vacation accommodation units permitted on a property where multiple dwellings are present or dwelling units are present, referred to here as stacking. As a result, administration of short-term rentals has relied on interpretation rather than clear zoning provisions. The lack of clarity becomes particularly challenging on properties with more than one dwelling unit, particularly with the recent Bill 44 legislation and small-scale multi-unit housing. When vacation accommodation regulations were first introduced, properties were limited to a single secondary suite or detached small suite per single detached dwelling. Now under SMU, both accessory dwelling units are possible concurrently, subject to the SMU criteria being met. Therefore, questions arise around how many short-term rental opportunities are permitted and how they relate to principal residence requirements. Over time, this creates a risk of inconsistent application and increases interpretive uncertainty. While the provincial legislation clearly establishes a principal residence framework, those requirements are not explicitly reflected in the zoning bylaw. Staff have sought to administer vacation accommodation in a manner consistent with the provincial intent, but the absence of explicit zoning language creates ongoing interpretive risk. As noted previously, staff have generally met the intent of the provincial principal residence requirement by linking to existing home-based business regulations. However, this has been determined to be a less than durable solution. And to be clear, this work is not intended to reconsider whether vacation accommodation uses are permitted in the district. The intent is clarification to improve alignment and predictability, as well as consistency with the provincial regulations and how the district has actively regulated the use under its existing zoning bylaw. In addition to the statutory public hearing, which would be required for these amendments, staff anticipate the need for clear public-facing materials to explain any proposed changes. Staff have recently launched a series of public information bulletins related to development permit activities, for example, and would consider this topic to warrant similar treatment. Coordination with the business licensing division and other internal departments would also be essential to ensure consistent implementation. And with that, staff are recommending that the Land Use and Development Committee recommend that council direct staff to prepare the zoning bylaw amendments and report back to the committee prior to council consideration. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions? Mr. Council Member, or pardon me, Committee Member Barry.
Thank you. Just a clarification, what was stacking? How do you interpret that?
Through the chair, so that would be the existence of multiple rather than a singular short-term rental on a property.
So that's from a single family dwelling that's using multiple rooms or whatever for,
That's one example, yes.
okay. Yeah, I'm all for all the work you're proposing here. Do you see any roadblocks to putting this together?
Through the chair, not necessarily. Roadblocks, could you maybe be more specific?
Or you're trying to align provincial legislation with our OCP as well as our existing land use regulations? They seem to be different.
Yeah, through the chair. So the what we're trying to do here is basically align the provincial framework with the way that we have been interpreting and applying the zoning bylaw in relation to short-term rentals. So we have been consistent with the provincial regulations, I think 99% consistent, but it doesn't come across that way clearly in the zoning bylaw from staff's perspective. So we're just looking to make some changes to make sure that's clearer for the public and also for staff for interpretation purposes.
Go ahead, Mr. Marshall.
Yeah, just as an example, when I first got here, there was a lot of confusion around what's the difference between a bed and breakfast, an Airbnb that, because Airbnbs can be a separate suite that's got a kitchen and the whole shooting match. Or as I found out when I was staying in Airbnbs locally here and made the mistake of booking a room in a house can be an Airbnb as well. So that in my mind would have been, well, isn't that a bed and breakfast? But they're not serving breakfast. So, so there's like all these, definitions as to what it is. And depending on what the definition says about it, there's other things that come into play. So parking, for instance, might be an issue for a suite versus an Airbnb versus a room. And so there are other things that could be affected by how you define these things. Yeah.
And just for my own understanding, an Airbnb, like to your point, Mr. Marshall, could be a room in a house, but it could also be a separate suite with its own kitchen and egress, right? That you could rent for a short term, like say up to a month, and not necessarily a room in a house. It's either, I think, right? Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, this is just I kind of look at, when I first read this report, it just seemed more like housekeeping in nature, because there's no change or no we're thinking of doing this. It's just housekeeping to streamline everything. Okay, makes sense. Any other questions? We'll go ahead, Ms. Ritz, or committee member.
No worries. Just to be clear, through the chair, just to be clear, the provincial legislation is one vacation home unit per principal resident. Is that correct?
Through the chair, just a minor change there. So the province with its act and regulations permits two on a property. So there's a principal residence. So it can occur within a principal residence and one of the two, a small suite or a secondary suite. So you could have two on the property as long as the principal residence criteria is met. And that's not clear in our zoning bylaw, so we would like to add that.
Okay, so the recommendation is that the Land Use and Development Committee recommend that council direct staff to, one, prepare proposed amendments to zoning bylaw number 600 to clarify and modernize the regulation of vacation accommodation uses, including alignment with provincial short-term rental legislation. 2, undertake internal coordination with the business licensing division and other relevant departments. And 3, report back to the Land Use and Development Committee with proposed bylaw amendments and implementation approach and any required public information materials prior to council consideration. It's moved by Committee Member Barry and seconded by Committee Member Ritz. Would you like to speak further, Committee Member Barry? Committee Member Ritz? Councillor Bateman? Mr. Marshall?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I was just thinking of another situation that we've run into where clarity is needed, or there's differing interpretations and legislation around short-term accommodation. And one is this requirement for it to be the principal residence of the person doing the renting out of the suite or the rooms. But we've run into cases where people want to go down south for 3 to 6 months a year, and it's still their principal residence, but they'd like to be able to get some income from it. So it's not that the house is going off the market only for short term, like somebody's still going to be living there for part of the year. So it's these kinds of, so in certain zones that wouldn't be permitted. So the province allows that type of use, but our zoning bylaw doesn't. So it would be a choice of council whether they want to be strict about that principal use as being, living there year round, never being able to rent it, or not being able to rent it out when you're not there. So those are the kinds of things that we would review with the community and committee and council to determine how do you want to handle these kinds of differences in how we handle these types of uses.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I mean, I could see if someone were to want to travel for 3 months, this does, may provide the income, but it also just provides sort of safekeeping of your property, because it would otherwise be vacant. You may hire a house sitter to come and go, but this actually provides somebody on site to look after your property while you're not there. So I see that as a positive. People do like to travel for extended period of time. So at least it would address that. That makes sense to me. The other question I just had, sorry, Councillor Bateman, I know you had your hand up as well, is does the owner have to live in the main part of the house? Because in some cases for lifestyle, they may prefer to be in the suite, allowing the main part of the house to be used as the vacation or short-term rental. Is that allowable?
Through the chair, yes. So the ability to rent out the principal residence on a short-term basis is not permitted. So it would have to be accessory, either a room or a suite.
And is that a provincial requirement?
Correct.
No, that's interesting. So we can't maneuver that because it just depends.
Yeah.
You may have a situation where a couple that had a family is in the upper part, and then they had the Airbnb or the vacation rental, but now being empty nesters, it's easier for them to take the suite and to have the main part of their house be that source of income because of their own particular needs, or one may be more accessible than the other, depending on the house. But that is a provincial requirement.
That's correct.
Yeah, that seems short-sighted to me, because I think people need the ability to use their house in a way that makes sense for their lifestyle without all the regulation on top. They can just live the way they live to stay in their home. So sometimes that needs to change depending on the family.
Just something to add here. So the district has the ability to apply for an exemption to these regulations, but the vacancy rate there's conditions associated with that. There'd be an application to the province to apply for an exemption. So we can also outline those details as well. Actually, we're just doing some research to confirm what those requirements are. So I can include that in the next presentation with the bylaw amendments as well for information.
Okay, no, I think that would just be helpful to have because the last thing you want, like people do invest in their property, it's their home, it's their castle, and they need to be able to use it in a way that makes the most sense to fit their needs. Because, some, it's not a vacation rental per se, but some cases it's the parents who want to live in the suite and then the older kids that are going to school and doing this and that, needing more space. Parents may wish to then travel and then you have a separation, but it leads to better harmony in the home in that way, and that works. So it just seems restricted, like an oversight by the province, but it would be helpful to get that and then council can take the next step from there. Councillor Bateman, sorry about that.
Worries. Thank you. Trying to think straight. Councillor Pearson has gifted me with a piece of newly smoked salmon here, and it is a major sensory symphony going on over here. But I just wanted to say thank you for both these reports. I think it's interesting to frame them in the wake of the OCP and getting that completed. And we've heard all along that once that was completed, you could move on to granular work in other areas. So we're seeing that in both these agenda items today, in search of creating less interpretive risk and administrative uncertainty. So I think that's really my point. That's all I've got. Thank you. Yeah, so clear, and this will result in the screenshot I've taken, clear public facing materials on these subjects, coordination with business licensing, consistent interpretation across departments, and reduced confusion for residents. So thank you for that work. And I guess it's always ongoing because fresh confusion arises routinely. Thank you for your work.
Okay, thank you. So I believe we've moved and seconded this. Okay, so anything further? I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. And now we hit item 7. Motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Committee Member Barry. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your time and your work today.